All right, we need to work on your seller report and your price reduction script. So in this video, I'm going to break down, I have 4 things to help you guys create a seller report that would naturally lead to the seller reducing their price to help you guys sell it in an educational and eloquent way. So let's dive into the 4 things. If you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. That really helps me out. Hit the notification bell if you do want to follow along. And thank you so much for supporting the channel. All right, let's dive in, guys. There's 4 things that we need to cover. I'm going to break each one of those down in depth, and I'm going to give you some language that I think will make a really big difference. And then at the end, let's talk a little bit about, what type of seller do you fire versus what type of seller do you hang in there with that may be uncomfortable, but you can get the sale. So let's dive in at the very end. So there's 4 things in a home seller report. Now, for those of you that were not in the business back in the downturn of 2007, 8, 9, 10, and 11, back then we used to be able to have 10 or 15, 20, 100 listings at any given moment, and a very small percentage of them would sell. So in the coaching and the training world, dealing with mega listing agents, we had to create a weekly or a bi-weekly seller report that allowed us to earn respect, allowed us to educate, and then allowed us to more organically get that price reduction that we needed to be able to get the property sold. So I was reviewing all of my notes and I figured out, okay, in 2022, no longer 2012, here's what we need to be doing. There's 4 things, and then let's dive in deep. Number 1 is we're going to share the latest stats from our marketing efforts with agent and buyer feedback, and let's get into that. Number 2, we're going to give them an update on any national news or economic news. And number 3, we're going to review any updates to the comps. I'm going to give you some really good language there. And then number 4, we will review their options. And of course, one of those options will be reducing their price. So let's dive in. Number 1 is we have to share stats of our marketing efforts and feedback, notes, and trends. Here's what I mean by that. Everybody today, depending on your website, your MLS, your company, there are stat reports that say, hey, between Zillow, Redfin, your website, the MLS, there are X number of views per your listing in a period of time. We have to show that empirical evidence that your marketing efforts is producing a tremendous amount of reviews. That's number 1. Okay, and figure out what the best format is to present that, okay? Because I don't want that to be you telling them. I want you to kind of show the report, whether or not it's via email or whether or not it's face-to-face. Okay, the second thing in this is how many showings have they received, and then what was the feedback received from those showings, okay? So it's really important that we keep track of those showings and kind of tally those up for those agents that have never experienced this before, because you sold the house in 24 to 72 hours or within 7 days. When we get to 2 weeks a month, that stuff really makes a big difference in the mind of the seller to help them understand that you've done your job in the marketing efforts and driving enough traffic into the home, and based upon all of these efforts, we still have not produced the result. And so it's not really your fault. The stats really tell the story about what's going on. A couple of notes here is I wrote down in the buyer and the agent feedback notes, no opinions. I don't want you to share your opinion. Well, we have all been saying no. Just I talked to agent X. Of the 10 agents that showed the property, I was only able to get feedback out of 5 of them. And I was looking at my notes right here from the 5 agents that I talked to. And here's some of the feedback. Now, some of the great services out there, like the Showing Times or Showing Suite, I forget what it is. Some of them have those automated surveys that go to the agents. And I would just say to all my agent friends out there, we all need to do a better job of presenting objective feedback back to the listing agents in this new market that we're about to deal with. It's super helpful for all of us to do that. So I realized how important that was as a listing agent when I was doing it. So then I would return that favor when I was showing buyers and an agent asks. I really try and be thoughtful about what the feedback was to be helpful to that listing agent. Together as a group, we need to support each other, especially as we move into some challenging times. So everybody up your game there. The last thing I wrote about showings and feedback was look for trends in the feedback, especially if you mentioned a concern at the listing appointment. Hey seller, you know that thing over there? I'm a little bit concerned about that and how buyers are going to react to that. And then when you get objective feedback in the trends from agents and from buyers, you can now kind of say to the seller, hey, it's clear to me now from the buyers and the agents that they didn't really like that thing, right? So it validated objectively your opinion, which is valuable. The third thing in stats and feedback is how many people showed up to the open house. And when you are doing the open house and you're talking to neighbors, buyers, and or agents, if you could start to kind of keep track of those numbers and do a better job with your notes, then you can now share objectively. See, that rounds out a lot of effort. The review, the views, showings, feedback, your efforts in open house. That's a very strong start to this equation. Number two, give them a strong update on the housing market and economic news. Thank you guys so much. You guys have all been watching my the last video that I uploaded to my YouTube channel on how to cover the housing market and do a video. So make sure that you guys watch that video. But there's two things that I wrote down here. One is, here's a script that I think is really valuable, is to say to your seller, hey, I was just in a meeting this week talking to my broker who's 30, 40 years of experience and some of the other top listing agents in town. And we were all discussing what's going on with the market. And here's a few things that we were all together collectively seeing as trends in the field right now. That is a killer script. And you guys do that in meetings, but if you just share it as your opinion versus that you're collectively connecting with some of the top professionals in your marketplace and collectively, this is some of the feedback that's so much more objective than just how you feel or your opinion. Keep that out of this conversation. And then the second thing in this on housing market and news is share any articles, any blog posts, any experts on YouTube that you're seeing out there that you're currently studying. Keeping current matters, blog posts would be really helpful, as we move into this next cycle of the real estate market. So make sure you get some good resources and share those resources with your sellers to help them know that A, you are on top of it, and B, for them to be able to read independent, objective authorities about what's going on with the housing market. All right, let's take a look at number 3. I wrote down, let's cover any new comps. And there's some super important language when we do this. I wrote down a little script and I'm going to read it to you here. Let's take a look at any new competition and options your buyers have, or the buyer who's going to buy your home that they have today. Then, what did buyers decide to buy instead of your property since you've been on the market? And finally, what new sales appraisers will be looking at when they value your home for your buyer's loan? Okay, so you can see I use very specific natural language to say the 3 things that I don't want you saying, which is, let's look at the new active listings. Terrible phrase that the public doesn't really understand. For most of you around the country, it's, well, let's look at what went in under contract, pending, or in escrow. That's industry language. And then let's look at some of the comps. like sold comps, those three phrases don't relate to the seller. So that script is super important. Let me say it one more time. Let's take a look at any new competition and options for the buyers today. Then what buyers did decide to buy instead of your property. And finally, what new sales appraisers will be looking at when they value your home for your buyer's loan. Right. So obviously we're going to cover the new active listings in the category, the new pendings, and we're going to look at the new sales, and we're going to present that to our sellers so they can see what's going on with the market. All right, let's get to step number 4, and this is where the magic lives, my friends, which is let's now review all of your options, and there are 6 options that I wrote down that we should do with all of our sellers. Option number 1, Mr. Seller, is is there anything that we need to change or improve in the marketing? Now, I've changed the first photo. I've changed things in the description. I have purchased new photos. I bought aerial photos to add to the perspective of the presentation of the property. I've added new details that I found through the feedback. So guys, look for new ways to improve your marketing, especially if the seller is asking you to do something. I promise you it's in your best interest to honor that request and to follow through with whatever that request is and get it done, and then let's move on. So option 1, improve or change the marketing. Option number 2 is change something about the property to increase the perceived value of the property. So staging, painting, move some of the furniture around, change some things, do a couple little fixes and improvements from the feedback that you've been getting from your professional perspective, from some of the feedback you've been delivering to them. Can you guys make some changes and improvement that the next buyer that walks through that door would perceive the property with more value and motivate them to write an offer? That is an option. Number 3, stay the course. Do nothing. Now, why is this important when you're addressing a seller? It's because what you're basically saying is, listen, this is your property, this is your house, I am your consultant. If you want to do nothing, that is okay. And what that does is it takes the pressure off them that they feel like you're trying to get them to do something, right? It's just a good psychology, okay? Number 4, this is where we get into the game. Micro price reductions, right? This is a great strategy. Now, the question is do you know how to explain this to a seller as to why a micro price reduction is advantage? And the way that I would do it is I would tie a micro price reduction with a change to the property. So I would be like, if I changed a photo, changed the description, I made some improvement to the marketing, then I would ask for a micro price reduction to then kind of get, because we all know what happens when you get a price reduction. An email alert goes out to everybody who has that property in their saved search. Notifications go out to all the apps. It gets brought back up into, position number 1 on everybody's search. And so agents and buyers all revisit that property online the moment you make that micro price reduction. So that's a huge marketing tool in our advantage when we are getting price reductions, especially if we make changes that you and I both believe could make the difference to getting an offer or motivating one of the buyers to, or motivating more people to show up. So micro price reductions is a great strategy, and making micro price reductions more often is actually a phenomenal strategy. Doing one a week for 30 days until it sells. That could be a great strategy for you guys to play out. Please take a look at that, present that, get comfortable with that. Then obviously number 5 is a 5% price reduction, and number 6 is a 10% price reduction. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here is all of our options. What would you guys like to do, right? That is the most powerful way. So in summary, is you start with, hey, here's what's going on with the stats of the marketing and the agent feedback. Here's what's going on with the housing market. Okay, here is what was step number 3, which was here's what's going on with the comps. And then step number 4 is their options. Beautiful workflow. Now, let's talk about the last thing, which is difficult sellers. So let me give you the secret ingredient to a difficult seller. So you've got sellers can get incredibly irrational, emotional. You can literally explain something perfect to them, and then they will actually go crazy. Like they're just completely in a weird, it's almost like they're like a lunatic for some weird, it's just weird what happens. So I have a lot of compassion for the stress and the psychosis that goes on with sellers. So I've learned that there's a few secret ingredients here. Okay, so number 1 secret ingredient, which is if the seller is highly motivated, they're going to sell the home, then you take the listing regardless if it's overpriced, regardless if they're kind of crazy, because the 4-step seller report will get the job done, whether or not it's in the first month or the second month or the third month or the 5th month. The seller report will get the job done if they have high motivation, even though we're a little crazy. There was a very influential moment in my career on this topic. I was at dinner with my brother-in-law, who's a great agent and also a coach, and my father, who's one of the greatest real estate coaches, in the history of the business. And my brother-in-law says, hey, I have this seller. They understand that the value of their home is here low, but they just want to list here. And then my father asked the magic question. He says, are they motivated? And my brother-in-law says, 100%. Then my father says, do they understand the true reality of the market? And my brother-in-law goes, yeah, she gets it. She's a smart lady. And he says, take the listing. And whammo, I was like, wait, what? I thought you weren't supposed to take the listing if they were overpriced, right? That's what I generally thought. He took the listing, and then he just followed good seller communication principles. They got an offer at the lower price. Then because he earned respect and trust with the seller, they negotiated the deal lower than the list price, and it worked. So that taught me a really important lesson, which is that the seller's motivation is the ticket. Now, I have an amazing client up in Toronto. She has a $12 million listing, and she is like, this guy is a crazy. He is just out of control. And I'm like, just do your seller report. Do your seller report. Do it every week. Do it every week. And she's like, he's nuts. He doesn't get it. And I said, is he motivated? And she's like, yes. His family's already moved to a different country. And I'm like, stay the course. Do the seller report. She's got to get him down from 12 million to 10 million. And he is just going crazy. But I'm like, just stay the course. And I kept telling her, have compassion for what he's going through. You understand this game. They're committed to you. Don't lose the listing because you're being reactive to their irrationalism. Just every week, give your seller report, and I promise you, they'll come down and they'll figure it out, and it'll just happen. And so we're already right now, they just got the $500,000 price reduction, and I'm saying, hey, go 500,000, do it every 2 weeks, because she needs to get down to 10 million for this thing to sell. And so that's her marching orders right now, 500,000 every 2 weeks. So she's on the right path. And I promise you guys, she's probably just going to get that thing sold within the next 30 to 45 days. But will she put up with a lot of, struggle in the process? Yes. But if you follow the seller report, they will come to the right conclusion when they're motivated, and you're doing an excellent professional job not responding to their emotion and their psychosis. So my friends, I hope that was helpful. And we've got a lot of work to do as we move in. I'm going to start working on a couple new listing lead sources and break those down for you. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the notification bell, give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment if I can help you with anything. And we'll see you guys over at the Success Summit for the Tom Ferry event in Dallas. So I'll be over there. I'm just talking to Tom about getting up on stage and doing a presentation for you guys. So sign up if you haven't done it, and I look forward to seeing you guys over there.